Good evening. Today is November 20th, 2025. I hope everybody's had a good day. I want to revisit an important year in history, an important year in my life, 50 years ago. Um, the year of 1975. In 2015, I was living in Ennis and pastoring Wayman Chapel AME Church. And I wrote this article for the Ennis Daily News. I did a weekly column there for about 10 years. And the title was The Year 1975 Revisited, My View of the World from Teague, Texas. I'm now 74. I was 64 when this article was published. And I was 24 when most of the events that are described took place. And here's a few of the things that happened that year. January 7th, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, remember them? They announced an increase in crude oil prices by 10%. On February 21st, former U.S. Attorney General John Mitchell and former White House aide H.R. Haldeman and John Ehrlichman were sentenced to prison because of their role in Watergate. On March 8th, the United Nations proclaimed International Women's Day. And on March 25th, King Faisal of Saudi Arabia was assassinated. He was succeeded by King Khalid. I was at a meeting in Waco that day when I heard on the radio about the king's assassination. On April 4th, Bill Gates and Paul Allen founded Microsoft. On April 30th, the Vietnam War ended with the fall of Saigon. On June 5th, the Suez Canal opened for the first time since the Six-Day War in 1967. On July 30th, former Teamsters Union President Jimmy Hoffa was reported missing in Detroit. He was later declared legally dead. On August 3rd, the Louisiana Superdome opened in New Orleans. On September 14th, Elizabeth Seton was canonized, becoming the first American Roman Catholic saint. On September 18th, fugitive Patty Hearst, heiress to the Hearst publishing family, who was kidnapped in 1974 by a student-led group known as the Symbionese Liberation Army, SLA, remember them? She was captured in San Francisco. On October 1st, Muhammad Ali defeated Joe Frazier in a boxing match in Manila, Philippines. November 10th, the United Nations General Assembly approved a resolution which was repealed in 1991 that equated Zionism with racism, a very controversial measure. On November 20th, the Spanish dictator Francisco Franco died in Madrid. On November 27th, Juan Carlos the first became King of Spain. There was a Baptist missionary to Spain later told me that religious freedom in Spain greatly improved under the rule of Juan Carlos. On December 8th, the New York City was approved for $6.9 billion bailout. The top 10 songs of 1975 were Love Will Keep Us Together by Captain and Tennille, Rhinestone Cowboy by Glenn Campbell, Philadelphia Freedom by Elton John, Before the Next Teardrop Falls by Freddie Fender, My Eyes Adore You by Frankie Valli, Shining Star by Earth, Wind and Fire, Fame by David Bowie, Laughter in the Rain by Neil Sedaka, One of These Nights by the Eagles, and Thank God I'm a Country Boy by John Denver. In 1975, I was living in Teague, Texas, where I was employed by the Texas Department of Public Welfare, which is now um, Department of Health and Human Services. I was a social worker for the aged, blind, and disabled. I served clients throughout Freestone County, driving down many of the area's country roads for home visits. I absolutely loved my job, often working 60 to 50 to 60 hours a week, never expecting overtime or comp time. While off duty, my main activity was research for my master's thesis in church state studies at Baylor on the Nation of Islam, belief in practice in light of the American constitutional principle of religious liberty. I completed this project in 1976. By the way, I was at a meeting in Waco, um, actually a training session orientation for my job with the department. And I'd heard on the radio that morning and told the class about King Faisal's assassination. In 1975, I also visited a number of Masonic lodges in the area and participated in Scottish Rite and Shrine events in Waco. And much was being said in the Masonic press about the fact that the President of the United States at the time, Gerald Ford, was a 33rd degree Mason and Shriner. On April 29th, 1976, when I was about to finish my thesis, I gave a presentation to the Church State Seminar at Baylor, meeting at the Tidwell Bible Building, next door to Waco Hall. My presentation was delayed because of a speech by President Ford at Waco Hall. And I stood on Spade Avenue along with many other people and had the pleasure of shaking hands with President Ford that afternoon. On February 25th, my great aunt Lily McKenzie died in nearby Mahia, Texas. She was the widow of legendary Limestone County lawman Boss McKenzie, who died in 1955. On February 27th, I attended her funeral at Blair Stubbs Funeral Home in Mahia. That night, I went to Waco, heard a lecture at Baylor by Dr. Harvey Cox, professor at the Harvard Divinity School, author of many outstanding books. In his talk, he discussed teaching classes related to various religious movements. Afterward, he and I discussed my research on the Nation of Islam and the death of leader Elijah Muhammad 2 days earlier. I met and talked with Dr. Cox again at Richardson College in Dallas on February 1st, 1979. I began 1975 at a watch night service at St. Mary's Baptist Church in Waco, where at the time I was serving as associate pastor to the late Reverend Dewey Pinckney. On April 13th, I changed denominations. I joined the St. Paul African Methodist Episcopal Church in Waco under the pastorate of the late Reverend James R. Anderson. On April 21st, I was licensed to preach at St. Paul by the late Reverend R.T. Thomas, presiding elder of the Waco Temple District. On October 10th, I was ordained as an itinerant deacon during the Central Texas Conference at Grand Chapel, AME Church in Austin. At the conclusion of this conference, I was greatly disappointed when I did not receive a pastoral appointment. I had a meeting with the late Bishop John Hurst Adams, Shortly after that, he assured me that by the next annual conference, if not before, he would appoint me to a church. And he kept his word. I received my first pastoral appointment in 1976 and was ordained as an itinerant elder in 1977. In the meantime, I preached at AME congregations in various parts of Texas. In many ways, 1975 was a transitional year. I made much progress related to my job, my thesis, and my ministry in preparation for greater things in subsequent years. Again, laid the foundation in 75. 76, I got my MA, got my first appointment in the AME Church. I got ordained an itinerant deacon in 75, appointed as a pastor in 76, ordained itinerant elder in 77. It's been quite a journey, and that was the beginning of it. And now I'm coming close to the end of it because next year, when I turn 75, I'll reach the AME Church's mandatory retirement age, trying to finish some much needed work at Bethel AME Church in Corsicana. And a lot of things have happened in the last 50 years. But my time in Teague was have very fond memories from that period. There was a time came I knew I needed to move on, so I moved on. God willing, next year my wife Deborah and I will be moving back to our hometown of Fairfield, 10 miles from Teague. So the journey is coming full circle. I wouldn't take nothing for my journey. Have a wonderful evening. God bless everyone under the sound of my voice.